sign of embarrassment was the sign of his deliverance. Until he reached a point that pride was no longer in the equation, God used his humility to be his point of deliverance. I began to understand from Mark 10 the similarities. Here on the side of the road was a blind man named Bartimaeus. And his identifying mark of his condition of being blind, broke, and bewildered was he wore the cloak of a impoverished man. A sign of one's impoverishment was that they wore a cloak to identify themselves of their condition and position in society. And word went out that Jesus would be passing by. And this man, who had been blind since birth, stood on the side of the road and began to call out using his voice. There were a lot of folk calling out, but this man Bartimaeus used his voice to call out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The folks said, "Hush up, be quiet, you're embarrassing us." But each time he got louder. What comes to my mind is that when you get in a desperate situation, you ought to have something that stirs up on the inside. That I'm not worried about what other folks say. I'm not worried about how I might appear. I need deliverance. I need help. And Jesus is the only one that can help me. And therefore he hollered out, "Jesus, Son of David." What I like about it, number one, there were many on the side of the road, but he did know who Jesus was. That meant he had some familiarity with who Jesus was and what Jesus could do. While many were calling his name, he was calling his name with purpose. Ted Williams said that until he accepted God again, that he hoped God would bless him. And he said, "I always had hope that while I stood on the corner, somebody would hear my voice." What I want to tell you, that no matter what your situation is, you ought to still hold on to hope. You ought to still have that desire that it's going to work out after a while. Preacher, what is hope? Hope. Well, number one, hope is that which we expect to happen that will work things out. Hope is that which we look and work toward, that it would work for our better good. Hope is expectancy for something to happen that you know is going to make things better for you. Now, when we who profess to be Christians lose hope, we're saying, I don't trust God to keep his promises. Now, this man had made some bad decisions in his life. And this blind man had by no means of his own, had found himself week after week beside the road asking for help and assistance. He had 9 children, no longer 10 years, no contact with his mother. His mother, who was a believer, kept believing and having faith in him. She has said in her interview that when she talked to him about God, he would hang up and not make attention. He felt ashamed. I've discovered when you're in a position that you can't help yourself, you have to hold on to that what you can't see and believe in that what you should know. And in the midst of that, he began to just identify his position of poverty. He put a sign up along the road. He said, I have a God gift of voice. He knew he still had that. Crack hadn't messed it up yet. All the drugs he used, he had been in prison. He had gone through these things. But then Isn't it something that when he spoke and used his voice, life changed for him? What I'm saying is when you're going through something, you better learn how to cry out. When you're dealing with a dilemma in your life, your dilemma can lead to your deliverance if you use your voice. I'm saying that you can't be quiet when you're struggling. You can't be quiet when you're feeling that I've got to get out of where I am. You can't be quiet when you know you need help from the Lord. You got to cry out and call his name. Blind Bartimaeus had been identified of being a loser. But there he discovered that there was something on the way. Desperation of our situation often places us in a position of surrender. Anybody ever been in a position of surrender? I'm talking about where you tried everything that you knew to try. And now there's nothing else but to give up and say, God, it's in your hands. Anybody been there? Anybody know that? That surrender is a helpless place to be, but it ain't a hopeless place. There's a difference between helplessness and hopelessness. Helplessness means it ain't nothing I can do. But hopelessness is ain't nothing I can do and ain't nothing nobody else can do for me. But when I'm in a helpless situation, I've got hope in the fact that God promised that he'd never leave me nor forsake me. So when I'm helpless, don't mean I'm hopeless. And that's the thing that we hold on to in the midst of this. We have to seek another source for our deliverance when we can't deliver ourselves. And so in this minute, I begin to understand that right now I'm concerned, as many are concerned, how this man is going to handle all these blessings. Because everybody can't stand to be blessed. Everybody can't handle a blessing. Right now, people are coming with him every direction. He's got an offer by the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's done a Kraft commercial that'll air today. He's been asked to be a broadcast announcer. He's being approached to do TV show. He's been approached for a reality. All of these things are hitting him. He's saying, I'm overwhelmed. And in the midst of that, we discover that those who have been in addiction, 5 out of 100 have a low survival rate of going back into the situation they left. What are you looking at? Well, it's the people that are around you can affect you when you get blessed. If everybody around you can't share and be happy about your blessings, after a while, the weight, the pressure might take you back from where you came. So I'm concerned about the folk around him and his perspective of being blessed. I look at the blind Bartimaeus and I discover that when he began to cry out to God, the folk around him told him to shut up, hush up, be quiet. But in the midst of that, he did not let his distractors take him away from his expected deliverance. He did not let the crowd affect his urgent plea. And he kept calling his name. And scripture said Jesus stopped in his tracks and looked around and told the folk that were trying to block him to bring him. Okay. The folk, your haters, can be the very ones to get you close to the master. Oh yeah, you don't understand. You don't understand. You understand. Your haters ought to cause you to pray more, trust him more, and depend on him more. But in the midst of all of this, we discover that blind Bartimaeus, when Jesus called him over, he came, and it lets me know that in the crowd that was calling out, how was it that Jesus heard Bartimaeus' voice over all the other voices? Because Bartimaeus called his name with an awareness of who he was. In the scripture, he said, Son of David, Rabbi, have mercy on me. He proved to him that I know that you are a deliverer and a